Go ahead and call this March 21st meeting of the Salina Planning Commission to order. Kai, can you confirm the Kansas Open Meetings Act required notice has been met?
I can confirm that the packet was posted and the required notice of the meeting was provided.
Thank you. Dean, roll call.
Before I call roll, I'd like to introduce to everybody Tom Sydow, who is recently appointed by the City Commission to serve on the Planning Commission. This is his first meeting. So,
Welcome.
Tom.
so I'm going to start with roll by calling Commissioner Sydow.
Here.
Commissioner Alt.
Here.
Commissioner Olson.
Here.
Commissioner Farber.
Here.
Commissioner Ivy.
Here.
Commissioner Waters.
Here.
Chair Mike Sill.
Here.
So we have 7 appointed members, and we have 7 in attendance, so we have a quorum to conduct today's meeting. And at this time, I'd like to call on the city's legal counsel, Greg Bankston, to make an introduction for you.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. For the record, I am Greg Bankston with the law firm of Clark, Mize, and Linville, and serve in the lead role as our firm represents the city of Salina. We don't, as you would be aware, customarily attend Planning Commission meetings, but we are certainly available to you all if need be from time to time. In this particular application, one of the shareholders of our firm happens to be a resident of River Run. While that doesn't present the classic client-to-client sort of conflict of interest, in consulting with the city manager, and it was certainly my recommendation as well, that under the circumstances, not knowing exactly what issues might be presented before you as you review the final plat application, we thought it advisable to look to outside counsel. Again, not so much conflict of interest as just avoiding any appearance of conflict and possibly more aptly any appearance of bias. So that's what prompted us looking for a good source for that counsel. And we were very fortunate, and I want to introduce to you Ms. Jackie Butler, seated here with the Adams Jones law firm of Wichita. In anticipation of potentially engaging Ms. Butler to assist you, we did go through, or her firm went through an extensive conflict of interest check, including all of the property owners in both River Run, as we know it now, and the proposed platted area. I can also assure you that to further avoid any appearance of bias, I've confirmed that Ms. Butler neither attended K-State nor KU. So we're good there. I had the privilege of becoming acquainted with Ms. Butler in her role as a director and former president of the City Attorneys Association. And she has certainly earned the respect of city attorneys statewide, both in those roles and in her scholarship in her writing and presentations in the furtherance of education of city attorneys across the state. She's also served in a similar role for the League of Kansas Municipalities in presenting the introduction to planning and zoning for the League's Municipal Training Institute over the last few years. Ms. Butler recently transitioned from her role after several years as Derby's city attorney. So she has advised planning commissions, city commissions, and the like. She's now in private practice, as I mentioned, with the Adams Jones firm. Her primary areas of practice are real estate, land use and zoning, and municipal law. And I'm confident, to the extent you may or may not have need for her assistance, that she will serve you well. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bankston, for looking out for the city's interest in this. Appreciate it.
You didn't attend Michigan State, did you?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, approval of the minutes. Have you all had a chance to read the minutes? And
You want to, oh, yeah, never mind. I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the March 7th, 2023 meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None being heard, motion carries. Dean, new business.
We have no scheduled public hearings or quasi-judicial matters or legislative matters on your agenda. We do have for you item 3.1, which is an application filed by Overlook Estates LLC requesting approval of a final plat of an 11-lot residential subdivision on a 52.9-acre tract of land located south of the River Run addition and west of Great Life Golf and Fitness. So I would just point out to you in the format of your meeting packet there is that we have staff's report, and then we have a whole series of drawings that try to show how this proposed plat layout relates back to the original master plan for the River Run property that was developed in 2003, and to just show how changes have been made. We have provided some background information about the approval of the original 2003 plat and plan development district. We've provided you with some information about how the original density has changed and been reduced from the original 113 dwelling units proposed in the spring of 2003 to what is now reduced down to 72 dwelling units as proposed today. We provided you with some information and excerpts from the 2012 fire code and a memorandum from the fire marshal. We provided some information about the geometrics of the streets in the area. We have, towards the end, provided language for the proposed reciprocal grant of common easement that deals with the Meadows Common area down along the river, proposed conservation easement language, and then there's a separate supplemental report at the back that deals with the off-site water line, and so we'll probably address that last. So in your packet you have the application that's been filed. You have a copy of the deed that's most current, and what's significant about that is that the property was purchased by River Run Estates LLC, and they have changed their name to Overlook Estates LLC, and that's reflected in the deed and in the articles of incorporation that they have filed. And then there is a request for variations from the subdivision regulations. One, a variation from the maximum length of a dead-end cul-de-sac street to allow Overlook Drive to extend 2,387 feet from the River Run Parkway subdivision entrance to the end of the cul-de-sac. And the second variation is to allow sidewalks to be constructed on only one side of Overlook Drive instead of both sides. And so, in support of those variations, the applicant indicates that those are needed and justified due to the location and configuration of the property and the surrounding ownership pattern. We have a golf course and a country club on one side, and Old River Oxbow, owned by the city, is flood control right-of-way, the Smoky Hill River channel, and it's not physically possible to develop a network of streets that connect to adjoining subdivisions, and this necessitates the dead-end design. The other thing that's unique about the topographic conditions in this subdivision is that it necessitates putting all public utilities in front along the street. In most subdivisions, you would have electricity, cable, and phone that would be in rear easements, but in this case, the utility companies don't want to put wire or conduit in the rear areas of the lots because of the drops in elevation, the tree cover, those types of things. So everything is going out in the front, which makes less room to have sidewalks on both sides of the street. We provided you with information about the original concept. This was formerly known as Meadow Muffin Farm. It was owned by the Veneer family for years. They came forward in 2003 with a plan to develop this in a residential fashion. They retained the services of a landscape architect with HNTB of Kansas City to design a layout for this property, and that same architect or landscape architect had designed and laid out Colbert Hills in Manhattan on the west side of Manhattan on property also owned by the Veneer family. And so recognizing that the property was unique because of how it was bordered and accessed as part of the original request, there was a request for a variation to the maximum cul-de-sac length and a variation to the requirement that sidewalks be constructed on both sides. And those were granted, and so we have that is the origins of the very first phase of River Run. And so, as we point out, the things that make this property unique are that it's relatively landlocked location and the shape and the topography. You have existing home sites border the property on the north. The Elks Club, now Great Life, has 2,000 feet of length on the eastern boundary, and so that left only the Marymount frontage as the potential street access to the site, and the choice of access points was further limited by a drainage channel and pond that's directly east of Marymount Road, or west of Marymount Road. Then you have the Smoky Hill River to the west, and the developer was very limited as to how he could lay out lots and streets within the developable portion of this. Another extenuating factor was the city's approval of the Mariposa Master Plan, and that master plan eliminated Cloud Street, which used to run straight from Markley Road down the north edge of the golf course. That was rerouted to the north, became Cedar Ridge Drive. And that improved overall circulation, but it eliminated Cloud Street as an alternative access. And so the Planning Commission approved the two requested variations at their March 18th, 2003 meeting based on the factors that I just discussed. And so the Planning Commission has the authority to vary provisions of the subdivision regulations. It does not have the authority to grant variations to the fire code. However, in 2003, there were no uniform fire code provisions that dealt with subdivision access at the time that the plat was reviewed in 2003. So we provided some additional detail about that historical development. There was, in 2010, an application submitted to replat Lot 1, Block 5, and that was an area that you have shown in your packet that had 10 3-unit townhomes. One of those townhomes was built, and then the developer decided that the property was there was not the market for the townhomes that he anticipated, so he reconfigured that existing platted property into single-family dwellings and reduced the density. And so, because that property had already been platted, city staff treated that as it was part of Mr. Veneer's vested development rights. The summary of where we are today is that in September 6, 2022, you approved a preliminary development plan and plat for this project. And you also recommended that the zoning be changed from agricultural to planned development R, single-family residential, subject to the condition that the minimum side yard on lots less than 2.4 acres shall be 15 feet, and the minimum side yard on lots over that size shall be 25 feet. The City Commission concurred with your recommendation on the zoning and voted to approve an ordinance changing the zoning of this property to Planned Development District R on first reading, and second reading was held in abeyance until the property was final platted. We have summarized your conditions of approval on the preliminary plan. Some of those have been addressed, and some of those conditions will be carried over to the final plat. So, in summary, the original development was owned, all 94 acres was River Run. It was owned by Veneer Properties and Rex Veneer. Overlook Estates has purchased the remainder of Phase 2 from Veneer Properties, except for the 29 acres down along the river, and that has been retained by Veneer Properties. They've filed an application requesting approval of the final plat, and this Phase 2 area is now going to be known as Overlook Estates Edition. So the original 2003 layout had 36 lots in this Phase 2 area. The new developers are proposing to create 11 large estate-type lots for single-family home construction. The area outside the lots would be common area for subdivision residents. An extension of Overlook Drive, which is a public street, would provide access to the new lots. So we wanted to summarize for your benefit. The following changes have occurred since September 2022. The first change is that the subdivision name has changed from River Run Estates to Overlook Estates. The second change is that the developers are proposing to separate from the River Run Homeowners Association and form their own homeowners association with their own set of covenants. Thirdly, they're proposing a reciprocal grant of common easement and maintenance agreement between the Overlook Estates HOA and the River Run HOA to jointly use and manage the common area along the Smoky Hill River. Mr. Veneer has transferred title to for the common area from Veneer Properties to the River Run HOA. However, Mr. Veneer is the only member of the River Run HOA. So it transferred in title or name, but it's transferred from Mr. Veneer to Mr. Veneer at this point in time. Another change is that the proposed benefit district for the offsite water line over to Markley Road now only includes the Overlook Estates addition and the county properties to the south, and does not include any portion of the original River Run addition. So on this map, the area outlined in red is the proposed benefit district boundary, and so it extends in this area and does not include, it includes Overlook Estates here, but does not include any of the original River Run addition. So the financing for the offsite water line extension, it's a little difficult to pick up, but it's a dashed line in blue. It will come down from the south end, extend over, down, and over to Markley Road, and that is the plan for the off-site water line extension. So the River Run addition was approved prior to the 2016 text amendment to the subdivision regulations and prior to the current fire code being adopted. So the provisions of the fire code that dealt with secondary access and the Appendix D portion of the fire code was not in place when River Run was platted in 2003. But nevertheless, River Run has one public street access point on Marymount Road, and it does have a secondary emergency access road at the south end of Overlook Drive as exists today that connects to the Great Life parking lot. This emergency access road provides a second means of access into the subdivision. And this emergency access point was included in the property purchased by Overlook Estates LLC. They are planning to leave it in place, but with a new realignment that would connect to their new street extension. So, as we look at the single public access, one possible interpretation is that the Phase 1 area of River Run is grandfathered in, and the new development contains only 11 lots, so only a single access road is required. This interpretation is countered by the fact that Phase 2 is an extension or expansion of an existing subdivision which contains over 30 residential lots. So under the Kansas Vested Rights Statute, the vesting of development rights occurs with the recording of the final plat. Because this Phase 2 area has never had a final plat, there are no vested rights to develop Phase 2, and Phase 2 is subject to the provisions of the current adopted fire code as well as the subdivision regulations. So on page 10 and 11 of your report, we have itemized 3 findings that we think support the maintenance of a single public access for this subdivision under the subdivision regulations. And the first is that this 94-acre property is at the south end of Marymount Road. It's bordered by a golf course, an old river oxbow, and the river. There's a ravine along the west side of Marymount Road. The topographical barriers and the configuration of ownership prevent the development of alternate circulation system and necessitates a long cul-de-sac design with a single access point on Marymount Road. The original concept had 113 dwelling units, with 106 of those feeding onto River Run Parkway. There was a traffic analysis prepared by a licensed engineer that concluded that River Run Parkway had adequate capacity to accommodate all the traffic generated by the single-family homes and townhomes. The 2011 replat combined with this plat reduces the projected traffic volumes on River Run Parkway from 1,060 vehicles a day to 650 vehicles a day, or by 40%. Therefore, the projected traffic volumes do not necessitate additional public street access points. And thirdly, because the developers of Overlook Estates are proposing to sprinkle all the new homes, a second means of access into the development is not required by the fire code. This fire code exception recognizes the effectiveness and reliability of properly designed and installed automatically sprinkler systems in mitigating the need to have 2 access points. So we think those points are in support of maintaining the single public street access point. And so the preliminary plan that you looked at in September was reviewed in accordance with the subdivision regulations. And so we've provided some additional comments about that, but we have determined that River Run addition directly abuts Marymount Road, that Marymount Road is a direct access perimeter street, that the subdivision is required to have at least one public street connection to Marymount Road, and that Marymount Road meets city street standards in its current condition. And so as far as street access and design, as noted, River Run area is served by a single public street, River Run Parkway, that connects to Marymount Road. There's a divided entryway, and this section of River Run Parkway is wider than a standard residential street. We would note that all the streets in the subdivision are public streets owned and maintained by the city except for Longfield Drive, which serves the single-family lots in the former townhome area. So our utility providers have expressed concern that the 50-foot street right-of-way in the subdivision may be too crowded to accommodate all the utilities in front of the lots. Therefore, utility easements were added to the front yards to accommodate franchise utilities. Our experience is that the water and sewer, the public utilities would be in the right-of-way, and then usually it is, and usually gas as well, and Evergy tends to want to be in the easement behind the curb and closest to the individual dwellings. And so as part of the design, a circular cul-de-sac with a small island is proposed at the end of Overlook Drive. And as we noted, as part of this application, the developers have requested 2 variations. One is to the maximum length of a dead-end cul-de-sac street, and one is variation to the having sidewalks on both sides of a public street. And so the subdivision regulations anticipate situations like this, and it states that if the Planning Commission finds that particular hardships or practical difficulties result from strict compliance with the subdivision regulations, it may approve variations or exceptions to the regulations so that substantial justice may be done. It also states that the Planning Commission shall not approve those variations unless it shall make findings based on the evidence presented to it in each specific case. So we have provided on page 15, we have highlighted findings that we think support the 2 requested variations made by Overlook Estates LLC. The first being that the location and configuration of the proposed residential subdivision is unique because Marymount Road terminates at the subdivision entrance and is not a through perimeter street. The configuration of the subdivider's ownership prevents the construction of a second public street connection. A secondary emergency access road addresses dead-end street concerns related to safety, health, and welfare of the neighborhood. The shape of the proposed subdivision is unique because of the way the property was initially acquired by the Veneer family. The proposed subdivision is unique because it's surrounded by a golf course, an old river oxbow, and the river. The topography is unique because of the steep and varied terrain, which is unique in Salina. A strict application of the maximum dead-end length to Overlook Estates would result in extraordinary hardship on the property owner by making the property undevelopable. The topographic conditions on the property necessitate that all public and franchise utilities located at the front of building lots, and that these requested variations will not vary the provisions of the zoning regulations, ordinance, comprehensive plan, official street classification, or any official map of the city. So we've got 11 lots, and we also have 2 lots that staff has requested be numbered for the common area. One is the lower meadow area, and then there's a second common area that's located behind lot 1. So you may have to blow that up just slightly, Dustin, but it's this area here. So you have this row of lots, and River Run, this is the match line between River Run and Overlook Estates, and the meadow common area is here, and then this is kind of a wooded ravine there, and that is also set aside as common area. All of the lots that are proposed have frontage on a public street. All of them meet the minimum standards of both the R and RS districts. The developers have chosen R as their underlying zoning. There are some severe slopes on lots 3 and 4, but all lots have an area where a permit could be issued to construct a home. There may be some creative site planning or some regrading that will be required on those lots. Some of the more rugged wooded areas are proposed to be preserved and protected by conservation easements. So as depicted on your screen, the difference is that the green area is common area, the brown areas, those would be owned by the individual lot owners, but subject to a conservation easement. So as to water supply, the applicant's design engineer is proposing to extend a 12-inch line into the Phase 2 area along Overlook Drive and then out the south end of the property to tie into the off-site connection to Markley Road. This line will provide domestic service and fire protection for the Phase 2 or Overlook area. We've done a separate supplemental report at the back that addresses the need for this line and how it will be financed. As we understand it, the applicants are going to request the creation of a internal benefit district for the internal water and sanitary sewer improvements. There will most likely be an attempt made to form a benefit district for the off-site line, and that will not include any of the current river run properties. The other thing unique about this property is the drop in elevation, and when you have drop in elevation, that makes sewers challenging. And so the design engineer is now proposing to design and install an 8-inch gravity public line that would serve the upper 5 lots. The lower lots, lots 3, 4, 6, 7, and 8, would have homes that would have their own individual ejector pumps that would pump into that gravity line. And so initially there was some discussion about constructing a public or private lift station that would serve those homes, but in lieu of that, the plan is to extend the gravity sewer as far west as it can go, and the lots at the far end around the cul-de-sac will have ejector pumps that will pump into that gravity line. As far as storm drainage goes, the runoff is just going to be directed to the cutoff channel that is located on the south boundary of this property, and that essentially will serve as the detention area for this subdivision. All electric services will be placed underground. The fire protection is from Station 4 at Marymount and Crawford. As far as the enrollment areas, this would be in the Meadowlark, Lakewood, and Central High enrollment areas. There is all the area shown as street right-of-way would be dedicated to the public for maintenance. All utility and drainage easements would be dedicated public easements. Between lots 3 and 4, right here, is a plan for an access easement. And what that access easement would do would be provide access to the lower meadow area. And it's going to be more than just a walking path. It's going to be wide enough to allow for a mower or small tractor to get from Overlook Drive down into the meadow area to do the necessary mowing and maintenance of that area. So again, there would be an access easement. That would also be the means by which the residents of Overlook Estates would get down to the lower meadows area. And so in terms of phasing, the plan is for the infrastructure serving this subdivision to be constructed up front. There will be no phasing. In terms of special assessments, the developer has submitted a Step 1 application to utilize special assessment financing to finance the cost of internal improvements. That would include Overlook Drive and water and sewer extensions. As now proposed, if there's a benefit district created for the off-site line, property owners in River Run will not be assessed for any portion of the cost of extending that line. So the original developer of River Run, Mr. Veneer, prepared and recorded a set of restricted covenants. Those covenants covered the full 94 acres that constitutes the River Run property. There were covenants and an architectural control committee that have been used to establish private housing design requirements and to establish guidelines for the maintenance of common areas and natural areas. So the developers of Overlook Estates are proposing to withdraw their 23.75 acre tract from the River Run HOA, including the common area behind Lot 1. They have filed articles of incorporation and have submitted bylaws and covenants for a separate and independently functioning homeowners association. They've also proposed what they're referring to as a reciprocal grant of common easement. And how that would work is the River Run HOA would own and manage the 29.15 acre Meadows common area, and the residents of Overlook Estates would have the right to access and use that common area. And they have also submitted some language for the proposed conservation easement. And so I think you have that, Dustin, where we can put that up on the screen.
The drawing of the easement or the?
No, it's labeled proposed conservation easement language. It's in the folder separately.
Yeah, I have it.
So this is the proposed language that's lettered on the face of the plat, which is too small to read, so I've redone it here. But the language states that no party shall have the right to construct any improvements on any of the real property described as being within a conservation easement on the plat, except for laying underground utilities and for construction of roads and trails. The real property designated on, I believe that's a mischaracter. It says common area, but I believe that's intended to say conservation easement, shall be dedicated for conservation purposes, but the respective owners of the tracts or lots shall have the right to maintain the area to prevent overgrowth of trees that would prevent any scenic viewing or to prevent the growth of noxious plants. The Overlook Estates Homeowners Association may but shall not be obligated to exercise jurisdiction over and act as arbiter with respect to any dispute over the conservation easement. So the idea behind the conservation easement is that you would have areas at the rear of those lots on the north side and backing up to the river that would essentially not be allowed to have outbuildings or any construction except for underground utilities or roads and trails. And so the proposed language to enforce or back that up is what was just on the screen. So we have provided for you on page 19 and 20 of the report is that if you concur with staff's finding that Marymount Road is a direct access perimeter street that meets the city standards, and you find that all policy and technical issues have been addressed to your satisfaction and the commission wishes to approve the plat, we would recommend that approval of the plat, including the two requested variations as to cul-de-sac length and sidewalks, be made subject to the following conditions, which we have outlined for you on page 19 and 20. In the alternative, you could postpone consideration of this plat if you feel like additional information is needed to take action on the applicant's proposed plat. If the commission finds that the criteria related to public infrastructure and/or access or connectivity have not been met by this application, then a motion should be made to deny the final plat, citing what criteria we have met. or have not been met. So Dustin, do you have that item that's, I guess it's referred to as fire code analysis, that you can put up? So we're just going to walk through this as it relates to the 2012 International Fire Code. And so the Fire Code Appendix D 107.1 states that developments of one or two family dwellings where the number of dwelling units exceeds 30 shall be provided with two separate and approved fire apparatus access roads and shall meet the requirements of D 104.3. And there's an exception to that requirement for two separate fire apparatus roads, and that exception is in cases where all dwelling units are equipped throughout with an approved automatic sprinkler system. Access from two directions shall not be required. And so, and then in the code commentary, again, exception 1 states that when there are more than 30 dwelling units, and we're treating this as more than 30 dwelling units because this is essentially an extension of the existing River Run addition, but this development will be equipped with, every home will have an approved sprinkler system. A second access road is not required. So we've provided a lot of information about that, but one of the biggest changes from the preliminary submittal in September and now is that the applicants are proposing to impose a requirement that all the homes in this subdivision be sprinklered. So with that, I'd be happy to address any questions that commissioners may have. We do have Fire Marshal Troy Long here if you have questions related to the sprinkler aspect and how that affects this subdivision. And then we can, if you have questions about the common area or conservation easement or the off-site water line, we can try to kind of address those by topic.
Do you have questions of staff? I think I would like to hear from Mr. Long, if he would, and give us a brief synopsis of why a sprinkled home requires less fire access.
Troy Long, Fire Marshal with Salina Fire Department. Your question is why it requires less access?
Yes.
So obviously, quick and early access for us is more about life safety than it is about property preservation. When you sprinkle a home with a residential sprinkler system, which is commonly known as a 13D, the intention of those isn't like what you would have in a commercial building. It's more based on life safety so that the occupants can get out of the structure, and they're not designed to save the structure, they're just designed to save lives. So that's why we wouldn't need, that's why that exception is in the code.
Quick question. So explain the difference between a commercial sprinkler system and then the residential one, please.
Strictly fire flow, the amount of water that's going to come out of a head.
Okay.
For the most part. I mean, it depends on how deep you want to get.
Cliff Notes version.
Well, the Cliff Notes are rather long as well, but so the amount of water that comes out of a sprinkler head is drastically reduced. Like I say, again, it's to allow occupants within the house to get out of the structure. A lot of those systems are dry systems that have a valve when one of the heads, frangible bulb fractures, water then feeds into the system. So the only head that activates is the head that's actually physically in the heated area. The domestic systems in a residential are designed to be tapped off of the same water system that is feeding the domestic water within the house. So you don't have to have a separate tap like you would a commercial system. A commercial system, we have 2 separate taps to feed that system. So that's probably the biggest differences.
Okay. All levels would have to be sprinkled in, so multi-story,
Absolutely.
would it be basement also then?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And how is that monitored? Is that on an inspection on an annual basis, or is it just at the initial build of the home?
So 13D systems require a different inspection ratio. Commercial systems, we see from quarterly to biannually to annually system checks on those. The domestic systems only require an every 5-year, and that's just because they have a simple switch that it isn't monitored. It doesn't call out to the police. It doesn't call the dispatch center or anything like that. It's just on a 5-year rotation that they come around and check everything.
I guess my question was leading towards what prevents a homeowner from not having that or disconnecting it, or it gets damaged in some way, and we're eliminating this one access with regards to there being sprinkling, but what if the sprinkler is not functioning?
I guess that's a question for their insurance company. I can't really answer what somebody decides to do after the home is built.
Fair enough, thank you.
In regards to the emergency access road, do you guys maintain or have some method of checking the maintenance on that or
So
recommendation?
we do an annual review of those. We go out, take pictures of them if they're.
Is that all through the city?
All throughout the city. We go around and take pictures. If they're overgrown, we write a citation and they have to get them cleaned up so that they're accessible to us.
Okay. Thanks very much. Any further?
I have one more. And I was looking through here trying to find it in this small book that we have printed out in front of us. There was something to the effect of staff does not believe it in the best interest to move that access road 300 feet to accommodate the 1/2 diagonal or whatever it is. Can you?
Sure.
Would you agree with that, or do you have some comment on that?
I would agree with it. As I put in my memo, topographically, it's just not feasible to move our current fire access 300 feet, which would have to be to the south. I don't know if you've been up behind the Elks to where their maintenance area is. It drops off there, and so it's just not feasible to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The location chosen in 2003, which Dustin is trying to show with his pointer, was based on the openness of the parking lot and the terrain that had the flattest terrain connected to the Elks property of any location along there. So that's why that was selected, because it had the least drop off in terms of terrain. And then you've got these buildings located farther south as well. So the staff's belief is that where it's located is the best location.
Any further questions with Chief Long? Thank you. Would the applicant or the representatives like to address the commission, please?
Good afternoon, Chairman, Commission. Thank you for having us here today. We appreciate your consideration. And to clarify quickly on that last item, we are not moving the fire access where it is. Where it is now, it is currently grass and goes up to a gravel area that will be crushed gravel that we will engineer and build and at our expense, or at our HOA's expense, maintain. And that will be to the 75,000 pound standard of our newest fire engine. Of course, we'll also be putting in a road for that to connect to. And with the sprinkler system, obviously, that access road is not needed by our development, but we did agree to put it in, and we are putting it in, and we'll engineer it, build it, and maintain it. Be happy to stand for any other questions on the development.
Any questions, Mr. Lee? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you guys very much. There is one update, too, on the reciprocal agreement that I will send. There was some language after speaking with one of the homeowners in Phase 1 today, and Mr. Veneer, that homeowner would like changed. So we have an updated reciprocal agreement that I'll be submitting that he has signed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any members of the public that would like to address this item?
We do not have anyone online, so anybody who is interested from the public would be in the room.
Okay.
Maurice Soderberg, 1628 Overlook Drive, and commend these guys for developing that property. It's a burger to look at. However, at about 3 o'clock today, I received 2 more pages of changes that affect the original HOA and how they're going to maintain the meadow. And I think you ought to postpone the proceedings on this because none of this is signed, and that bothers me. I think good best practice would tell you to wait till I get this stuff signed between Rex Veneer and the purchasers. I agree with what's written, but enforcement would be a problem if something changed. So, thank you.
Commissioners, Lance Cochran on behalf of the development. Mr. Soderberg is misinformed. We've already added all of the changes to the agreement. I'm their attorney, and Mr. Veneer signed them. Mr. Ritz has approved them already, so that's a non-issue. The reciprocal agreement's completely done and signed. So,
Mr. Soderberg, did you understand that?
No, I couldn't hear him, but go ahead.
He said that the agreement is signed and it is in.
We have not seen a
Mr.
copy.
Ritz has seen it.
What?
Sid has seen it. Sid has seen it and approved.
When did he see it?
This afternoon. I sent it to him. 3:15.
After I got this, then, huh? When I talked to him, it wasn't signed.
Well, he said he was going to call you. He must not have gotten a hold of you.
Okay.
I'd like to see it before it proceeds.
It's right here. All the changes.
So that appears to be a non-issue. So anyone else in the audience like to address this item?
There's the red line, so it's all clear for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. As you know, I've been before you a couple of times.
Your name and address.
Oh,
for
I'm
the-
sorry.
That's okay.
I've been here
I know.
3 times. John Blanchard. I live at 250 South 9th Street in Salina.
Thank you.
Don't mean to be too formal, but just for those new to the game, I just would like to provide sort of an explanation why I'm up here and why this is important to me. I graduated from Kansas State University in 1988 from the College of Architecture and Design with a Bachelor of Landscape Architecture degree. I've been in the land planning and landscape architecture and land development business for over 33, close to 35 years. I'm sorry. The reason I'm up here is like anyone that would be a member of a profession. I am a member of a profession and take professional oaths to how I'm going to conduct my practice and how I want my profession to proceed. And so, especially in the field of planning, there is an obligation by practitioners to, when they see something that can be clarified, and I have the unique opportunity to come to a board and help to provide clarification, that I feel like I have a professional obligation to do so. So that's why I'm here. You know, there's a lot of talk about grandfathering and all that, and those are all good arguments. There's also conversations about whether grandfathering survives a replat, and I don't think that's the conversation for today because you guys are looking at a final plat, and that's really what you should be focused on. I don't have a problem with the HOA stuff because I don't know anything about it. I don't know anything about the water distribution system. I don't know any of that. I know about access. And I know about cul-de-sac length and subdivision regulations and fire codes and all of those things. Because as a practitioner, I'm required to know those intimately because I have an obligation to my client to know that. At the first point, during due diligence before they buy the property, but as someone that's designing a project to be able to come to a planning commission or a planning staff and make sure that I'm giving them information that provides for a legal plat and there are no issues that come up down the road, whether it's during the planning and platting process or whether it's years later when we go, oops, we have an illegal subdivision here. So I appreciate your diligence towards this. So I'm only going to focus on the emergency access road because you've granted a variance on the cul-de-sac length, and I think that even among land planners, we can agree and disagree about what's adequate. So you've ruled on that, so it'd be inappropriate for me to comment on that. But as far as the fire access point, and in particular, Appendix D of the fire code, I think the easiest way for me to do this is to talk to you like you're my client. And I have to break the news to you that we can't do this project because it won't meet code. And so if you'll hear me in this way, and I'll show you a few things. First of all, in March through May of 2016, there was an application to replat this. As part of the packet for that, there was a statement in the punch list of a requirement for the Elks Club at the time, and which is the current Great Life, that there be an easement, public access easement granted before any building permits would be issued. And that was a condition of the final plat in 2003. And as of March and May of 2016, that easement had not been, according to staff, had not been recorded. And so the first question would be, is that access easement agreement, has that been recorded since 2016? And the reason I ask is because it's important to establish not just what that access easement is, but how we clearly define the road. So is there kind of a question of staff? If otherwise, I will assume that it hasn't been recorded. So you talk a lot about, and I have to agree with everyone that when the emergency access road was put on there from Overlook Drive to the parking lot of the Elks Course, I think that the land planner and landscape architect at the time that designed this put it there because it was the best place for that to be, because there was no fire code. So he placed that in the best place for it to be, and I completely agree with that. But that has no consideration whatsoever on the fire code requirement. And I'd like to show you why. Chairman, could I ask Dustin to bring up the map of where the entry cul-de-sac is going in, the main entry point off of Marymount Road? Yeah.
Can I get an idea of how long we are going to be working on this?
2 or 3 minutes.
Okay.
Let me, because it's very illustrative. If you can zoom in on that circle at the end of Marymount. Okay, stop. Okay. Now, the road that goes down to the left goes into the subdivisions. That's what we're calling the main entrance into the subdivision, the primary access, okay? The other access is 1,000 feet south of this traffic circle, okay? But that's only where the road begins. So if you go back to Marymount, the circle on Marymount Road, and you put your crosshairs just north of that landscape circle, right there, that is your single access. Remember, you're my client. I'm breaking this bad news to you. That's your access point. So if you can tell me anyone how, if I've got an emergency and someone has to come in, or I have an emergency and someone has to get out, where is the second point of access? There is no second point of access. I mean, it's a trick question. So that's what the code requires. The code requires that you have 2 access points. And it doesn't matter, development doesn't matter. All that matters is the number of houses that are serviced on a single access road, okay? And so it doesn't matter where that street is. And Dean Andrew even pointed out for you in your packet on page 12, he says that, it's actually on page 11 and continues on page 12, that based on the intent of the fire code to reduce the likelihood that both access roads would be compromised or made unusable by a single event. So if your single event is where the crosshairs are, it doesn't matter where in there you're accessing from. It's whether you're able to get in or out. And it says the fact that the access can only occur from the north is a factor that could be taken into account in analyzing the intent of the fire code. I would contend with you that the only thing I would disagree with that is when it says is a factor that could be taken into consideration. I believe in order to be consistent with the intent of the fire code, that word should be must be taken into account, because you have an obligation to follow the Salina Code, and Chapter 14 of the Salina Code is fire protection, and part of the fire protection code includes Appendix D, and this subdivision does not meet the requirements of the fire code. And if you have any questions, as my client, I'm not billing you, but if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to clarify.
I don't intend to get in a debate with you, but I
Okay.
believe that that's
No,
what the sprinkling.
I'm not debating.
I
I'm just-
believe that's what the sprinkling of the dwellings, the mandatory sprinklings is for.
Mind if I address
So-
that? Because what the code says on that is it says in developments of more than 30 units, and Dean told you, this is just phase 2 of this. This will be 75-ish units or whatever. There'll be significantly more than 30 units. All of the dwelling units throughout the development must be sprinklered. These guys have 11 lots. They cannot make the people that bought lots there already, they cannot compel them to put sprinklers on their homes. So there's no way for them to do it. And then I think you might ask yourself on this. In my opinion, the 11 sprinklers are unnecessary. Because if you already have 2 points that are legal, why put sprinklers in them? Right? So the sprinklers are irrelevant, 11 sprinklers, as it pertains to the code. So that's just my kind of advice to you. You have legal counsel here. I think having served on a public board before, and if you have legal counsel available to you, I would recommend that if you have any questions whatsoever about complying with the fire code and the intent, that you might, and I don't know what her legal advice might be, but she's there and we're paying for her, and it might be advisable to seek her counsel. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else care to address this item? And Dustin, you said we didn't have anybody online, is that correct?
Correct. We do not have anyone from the public online.
Thank you. Okay. Bring it back to the commission for discussion and action.
I believe some interesting points were just brought up. If this is considered a secondary access road, why are we requiring the sprinkling? Is that a question for staff, or is this just discussion amongst us, or what?
They are proposing that as a solution to take any questions about the number of access points off the table.
So are we looking at this as a continuation of the original River Run, or are we looking at this as a whole separate plat on its own? Meaning, would the original river run stay under the grandfathered pre-2016?
We prefer the term vested, the grandfather. Vested means that you have an investment-backed expectation to allow you to continue to develop it without.
I can't hear you. Is your mic on?
We use the term vested, not grandfathered. Vested refers to that you have a vested right to develop the property under the rules that were in place when your development was approved.
So that, the original's vested, is this a new plat then, or?
This is a new,
So we're treating it like post-2016?
well, we're treating it, they do not have a vested right to develop it under the rules that were in place in 2003. They have a right to develop it under the rules that are in place in 2023. And that includes the subdivision regulations, and that includes the 2012 fire code.
So I would ask our fire marshal again, are you comfortable with the provisions and that this meets code? Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's, I mean, I trust you. That's
Yeah.
what.
So if you don't mind staying there, so basically the provision allows, the example that I would give since I'm wearing purple today is in Manhattan, you have the same areas where, based on the topography, it's hard to have two access points into it. You're in a hill area, you've got rivers, you've got different things coming in. So in those situations, if you build a subdevelopment over so many properties that instead of having two access points, you go in and require sprinkling systems within those residential areas. Is that the intent?
It is.
Okay.
And there's also a provision in, and I didn't bring my papers up here with me, but I think it's 104.8 that talks about modifications that you can't meet the strict letter of the code that allows the fire department code official to be able to make those adjustments or see those as appropriate. And in this situation, I think this housing development has done as best they can for them to throw sprinklers in this new portion of the development is kind of extra meat on your sandwich, I guess, for lack of a better metaphor.
Okay, great, thank you. And I would remind my fellow commissioner that the same type of developments are also in place in Lawrence, Kansas. Manhattan doesn't have any hold on that.
So question back to Dean then. So the original development, the River Run part, how many, remind me, how many plots were there totally in that initial development?
When you were talking about the very original concept?
No, the part that, yes, originally, and then...
When the Planning Commission first saw, March 18, 2003, the concept for developing River Run, there were 113 dwelling units.
Okay.
So you had 47 single-family lots, you had 10 three-unit townhome buildings in a cluster, and then you had the 36 lots that were part of the Phase 2 area. And then in that townhome area, only one of the townhomes got developed, and Mr. Veneer changed his vision, and that area was reconfigured into single-family home sites. And then the other variable is that the original concept had 36 lots in the Phase 2 area. Those 36 lots had been reduced to 11. And so from a very original concept of 113 dwelling units at full build-out, there would be 72.
Okay.
And part of that is the it's admittedly confusing. It's been even a little confusing for staff, but there's 3 lots in Phase 1 that were purchased by Overlook Estates, and those 3 lots are being pulled into this area. So these are 3 vacant lots. They're in Phase 1. That property was purchased by these developers. They're eliminating those 3 lots and merging them into a single lot. So you're actually having 3 lots come out of the Phase 1 area, and so there's actually a net of 8 as opposed to 11.
Okay.
Any further discussion?
I mean, we have the letter from Fire Marshal, and I appreciate him being here today. And as I was reading through this packet this weekend, that 3rd paragraph that is there, it basically takes the onus off of us and puts it back on him. And I don't have the fire training, I don't have all of that information, but I do appreciate the letter that he provided for us. And are we, and I guess is a question for staff or legal counsel, we're not circumventing any type of fire code by allowing these differences, correct?
So, again, Jackie Butler, special counsel. What you've got is, and it is complicated because you have those vested development rights for, by my calculations, 61 of your 70 lots, or 72 lots overall. And so that decision on the plats approved in 2003 and in 2010, that replat said that the access was appropriate, and it approved that emergency access road as the secondary point. All right. And your fire code wasn't in effect in 2003. So now you're looking at this replat, and you've got the 11 lots. You've got the offer to sprinkle, and you've got your fire official telling you that he feels that that's compliant with your code and that he's willing to put in writing a modification, finding that that emergency access, that secondary emergency access point as it's located is appropriate under your code. And the requirements of this plat, or the proposal for this plat, also includes that they're going to improve that secondary point. So I think that you're exactly right. Can you rely on your fire official to make that interpretation? He's the one vested with that authority for the city. And he's telling you that he believes that you're compliant, that the proposal is compliant, and that maybe it exceeds what's required with that offer of sprinklering the homes.
I'm comfortable with that, from our fire official, if you guys are. If the other question I had was on the variations on the maximum length of the cul-de-sac street. How far off are we on this? City code allows for a certain
City
distance.
code allows for a maximum length of 600 feet by right. The road that's built already exceeds that 600 feet because that was approved as a variation in 2003. And so there are other examples of that around the community, even streets like Enterprise Drive, which extends south from Schilling Road over by Vanderbilt's, and properties like that. That road exceeds 600 feet. It has some interim turnaround points along the way, but any time the Planning Commission is asked to approve a dead-end street that exceeds 600 square feet, that has to be done through a variation, and the Planning Commission needs to make findings that they are comfortable with that distinguish the proposal in front of them from other developments. And so what we've tried to do on page 15 of your report is provide findings that would justify having a cul-de-sac length that exceeds 600 square feet. The one thing we would point out is that the length of the cul-de-sac is actually much shorter than what was proposed originally in 2003. And so I think, Dustin, if you had the original master plan. So the road is going to terminate right in here now, and so this extra length, I believe the length at that time was estimated to be about 2,900 feet, and this measuring from the tip of the entrance where River Run Parkway intersects with Marymount to the far end of Overlook Drive is 2,300 feet. The other thing I would point out, and Mr. Long may want to comment on that, but one of the things that was one of the concerns about having extra long long cul-de-sacs is for fire department crews to travel long distances to be able to turn around and get back out. And so one of the things that was built into the design for River Run was the traffic circle at the entrance, and then other points within the subdivision for turning around opportunities so that you didn't have fire apparatus or emergency vehicles going the full length of those dead-end streets in order to turn around.
Can you tie that into the new road construction, and is there a turnaround point? I mean, if you look at we've got the cul-de-sac up top that you just showed, but going down to the new development, is there a turnaround point prior to that also?
I don't believe what's the divided entry there would be wide enough for a turnaround, so the turnaround point is here.
So go back to the other one then, what we just had on. So we've got the turnaround up top, that one. So the distance from that point to the new development, because we don't have a turnaround at that point, is going to be all the way down. So what's the length of that?
I have it in a note card in my office as I added up these different segments. I know it's 540 feet from River Run Parkway to the turnaround, and then there's around close to 800 feet from the turnaround to where Overlook Drive terminates. And so that you're going to have an extension from where you see the pavement end there into the subdivision.
And I guess that would be my question then back to Mr. Long, again, because I had to sit through the Grand Mirror situation with that long cul-de-sac, and part of what we dealt with there too was the length and then the build-in of the turnarounds in there. So the length from that point to the far cul-de-sac, you don't have another turnaround point in between there. Does that become a concern?
Right, and I thought I printed it out. I must have forgot to grab it off my printer. Do you have a copy of the commentary of the fire code from she has a copy right there. Look at that. And I've tried to explain this in the past.
Hey, Troy, is what I have on the screen what you're looking for?
No. Well, it might be. So the commentary talks about the reason for the not having those long cul-de-sacs. And as it talks about in here, it says, we don't want to back fire trucks a long ways, because when you start backing fire trucks a long ways, especially in neighborhood streets that have cars parked on both sides, you end up backing into somebody's car. So the intent is that we have a place to actually turn a fire truck around. And the commentary code, and it's not actually the adopted portion of the code. You have to go to the code language, but the commentary explains why we asked for this. The guys that created this code said, this is why we want a turnaround. And it says in there, it says, Dustin had it up there. I was just trying to find the sentence that said that. To access.
The code section that I have up is dealing with the remoteness, so it's a different code section.
Yeah. But it talks specifically to having a place to turn your fire truck around. I can find it for you. And
So your opinion, given this layout and the density of the homes and the possibility of people parking on the street, are you comfortable with that length?
yeah, at the end, having a cul-de-sac, being able to have a place to actually turn a fire truck around is what we look for. We just don't want them trying to back down a curvy road. Just safer for everybody to have a place to turn around.
Okay. But it doesn't become a concern that if you're in one area that you're gonna have to travel all the way down to the cul-de-sac in order to turn around, right? Because if I go back up go up to this. So you've got the cul-de-sac up on top, the other one's gonna be down on the bottom. So if you have to service something midway in between, you're gonna drive all the way back down into the cul-de-sac on the south in order to turn around.
We would.
And that doesn't become a concern, was my question.
No.
I guess I didn't state it very well.
Our guys go out and do surveys of things like this all the time. And that's, I mean, it's just a typical thing that they do.
Okay.
And they do that just to make sure, do we have an area here that concerns us that they bring to me if we need to address it, so.
Okay.
Thanks. We appreciate your time and your expertise. Any questions or concerns on the sidewalk issue? No? Okay.
Just to answer your question, I went back to my notes. It's 1,840 feet from the turnaround to the end of the cul-de-sac on Overlook Drive extended. So it's 540 feet in from Marymount to the turnaround, and then it's 1,840 feet from that turnaround to the turnaround at the end of Overlook Drive.
Okay.
Okay. Any further motion? I would entertain a motion, unless there's any more discussion.
Was there no, we got the 8 findings in support of the variations. Was there no findings against the variations at all? Is there nothing?
Well, if you do not support the variations, then as part of your motion, you should cite the reasons you don't support the variations.
Would you care to make a motion?
I'd be willing to move that we approve P03-4D filed by Overlook Estates requesting approval of the final plat, the 11 residential lot subdivision, with the 14 items that the staff recommends on page 19 and 20.
Is there a second?
I
Second.
want to clarify that motion includes approval of the 2 requested variations.
Yes, yes.
Okay. And been moved and seconded by Commissioner Olson. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
So we are 6 for and 1 nay. Motion carries. Other business.
For other business, at this point in time, we do not anticipate having a meeting on April the 4th, but we do anticipate having business for you in a meeting on April the 18th. But we will send you out official notification if that meeting is canceled due to lack of agenda items.
That'll be a paid holiday for us, right?
Yes. You'll
Public
get paid time off.
Yeah. Public forum. Do we have anybody online, Dustin?
We do not have anyone from the public online right now, so anyone interested in public forum would be in the room.
Okay. Mr. Blanchard? And we've got your name and address. We're going to let you slide on that.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
Also, I appreciate you giving me a little bit of time during that thing. I understand your vote on that, and I halfway apologize that I wasn't able to be more clear as to why it doesn't meet the code. But I had limited time, and you had a very confusing staff report and a very contradictory comments made by the fire marshal, and those will all have to come out in the weeds. I will say this, though, that a final plat has to be stamped and signed by a registered professional engineer. Ms. Waters, you know that. And the other thing is that this needs to go back to the city commission. The preliminary failed it, or passed at city commission 3-2. And the main reason is there was a concern about this second access. In fact, when I brought it up at the city commission meeting, a number of people, a lot of residents were here, and I remember clearly hearing Sidney Soderberg go like, yeah, there's only one. So it's really clear, and probably the best way that I can show you what a single access subdivision looks like in an illegally platted subdivision is direct you to go out to Golden Eagle Estates, number 5, commonly known as Wildcat Circle. Wildcat Circle is a single access subdivision with 71 houses on it. It was platted in 2008, and as you know by your packet, the original fire code Appendix D with all this information was first passed in 2004. So in 2008, staff told you that, hey, this thing meets all the regulations, it meets all the requirements and everything. It passed unanimously. It passed through city commission and everything. And as you know, Mr. Andrew made comments back in October that nobody could tell the future and tell that in 2016 there would be a fire code that would require this. The bottom line is that I came to you before and I said, trust but verify. Trust but verify. Mr. Hay, when he was sitting there in that chair, John, said, yeah, I think we need to trust verify. Mr. Farber, I appreciate you looking at this. I don't know what your no vote was about, but I appreciate that you didn't just go along. Sometimes we need contrarians. I'm one of those. But I don't hold you in contempt or anything whatsoever, because I think you can only act on the information that you're given. And just to kind of sum it up, part of my philosophy on everything, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Schumacher, E.F. Schumacher. He wrote a really great little book called Small is Beautiful, but in part of that he had a small little sentence about land use. And it basically said the way a society uses its land, if you show me how they use their land, I can reasonably predict what their future will look like. So that's why your job here is important. We need to really be good stewards of the land. And so I appreciate you overall for being willing to serve in that capacity. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Soderberg? Okay. Okay. Looks like we are done. Is there a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
And a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried.